The adaptability of the United States Coast Guard is legendary and often considered synonymous with its very operations. During the critical years of World War II, this branch of the U.S. military demonstrated an astonishing range of duties, spanning from frigid Arctic patrols to the scorching heat of Pacific amphibious assaults. Fleet Admiral C.W. Nimitz recognized this exceptional versatility, noting that he knew of no instance where Coast Guardsmen failed to acquit themselves in the highest traditions of their service. They proved themselves worthy time and again of their enduring motto, Semper Paratus, or always ready. Yet despite this widespread contribution across every major theater of conflict, the Pacific, Atlantic, and Mediterranean, the service often struggled for distinct recognition. During wartime, its identity was sometimes lost because its actions were often grouped generically with the Navy. The recognition of the thousands upon thousands of Coast Guardsmen who served with courage and dedication is long overdue. They performed vital roles in combat support, logistical supply, rescue operations, and intelligence gathering, fundamentally shaping the course of the Allied victory. Their history is marked by profound dedication, culminating in moments of supreme heroism, such as the sacrifice of Medal of Honor recipient Douglas A. Munro, who embodied the service's commitment to saving lives even at the cost of his own. The story of the Coast Guard in World War II is a narrative of essential, yet often unsung service performed globally under constant duress. The foundation of readiness, background, and theory. The United States Coast Guard is a military branch built upon a history of maritime service and organizational consolidation. Its official establishment by the U.S. Congress occurred on January 28, 1915. At the time of its formation, the USCG became the fourth established branch of the U.S. military, joining the U.S. Army, the U.S. Navy, and the U.S. Marine Corps. This new service branch was the product of a merger between two older established entities. The first was the U.S. Revenue Cutter Service, which dates back to August 4, 1790, a date traditionally considered the actual birthday of the USCG. The second was the U.S. Life Saving Service, which had been founded later in 1878. The early mission assigned to this newly formed Coast Guard was focused primarily on the safety of life at sea, alongside the crucial duty of enforcing the nation's maritime laws. These foundational responsibilities, safety and enforcement, would define the core character of the service. However, the organizational structure of the Coast Guard was refined further just before the onset of the Second World War. On July 1, 1939, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt executed Reorganization Plan No. 11, which mandated the merger of the U.S. Lighthouse Service, founded in 1789, into the USCG. This incorporation brought centuries of navigational and coastal maintenance expertise under the Coast Guard's umbrella. With the world rapidly descending into global conflict, the mission, duties, and responsibilities of the USCG were poised for immense expansion. This expansion would quickly take Coast Guardsmen to far-flung locations across the world. The exigencies of war also necessitated a formal transfer of oversight. While generally under the Department of the Treasury, the USCG's purview was swiftly transferred to the Department of the Navy during the duration of World War II. This administrative shift cemented its role as an integrated element of the nation's combat forces, ensuring seamless collaboration and deployment alongside naval operations. The detailed account of this comprehensive wartime role has been thoroughly documented in historical works, such as The U.S. Coast Guard in World War II by Malcolm F. Willoughby. The theoretical basis for the Coast Guard's success in World War II rests entirely on its adaptability, a concept Fleet Admiral Nimitz noted was synonymous with its operations. Because the Coast Guard was always ready, Semper Paratus, it could execute a remarkable array of roles, often simultaneously across diverse environments. These roles extended far beyond traditional maritime patrol and rescue duties. One of the most significant and geographically widespread roles involved amphibious operations. The U.S. Coast Guard provided operational support for every single major amphibious landing carried out by the Allies. This included massive invasions in the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Mediterranean theaters. Their duty was incredibly dangerous, frequently requiring them to land troops directly onto invasion beaches while under intense enemy fire. This logistical and combat support was indispensable for securing beachheads and initiating ground campaigns. Furthermore, the USCG supported a wide range of combat missions. Coast Guardsmen were actively involved in troop transport, moving essential fighting forces where they were needed most. They were also crucial to the logistical backbone of the Allied effort, responsible for delivering thousands of tons of supplies to military forces deployed across the globe.
A constant grueling responsibility throughout the war was convoy escort duty. These escorts were critical for protecting the lifelines carrying troops, materiel, and food across the U-boat-infested waters of the Atlantic. The Coast Guard also participated directly in hunting enemy submarines, taking on the lethal challenge posed by the German U-boat fleet. A less recognized but strategically vital role was the operation of weather stations at sea. Manned by Coast Guardsmen, these stations collected essential meteorological intelligence. This data, covering winds, temperatures, humidity, and pressure, was critical for operational planning, influencing decisions for major events like the Battle of the Atlantic. This meteorological effort was so essential that it became known as the Weather War, fought between the Allies and Germany. On the home front, the Coast Guard was responsible for guarding the vast U.S. coastline and its beaches. This duty was carried out using various methods, including specialized dog and horse patrols. After capturing enemy territory, Coast Guardsmen also played a security role, protecting newly captured enemy beachheads while simultaneously searching for hidden enemy snipers. Finally, the adaptability of the service meant they frequently stepped in to fill manpower gaps. They were tasked with manning U.S. Navy ships and provided aid to Navy personnel at times when the Navy's own manpower was strained or limited. Through these varied, high-risk duties, from frontline landings to solitary weather patrols, the Coast Guard proved its indispensable value during the world conflict. Operational excellence, main analysis, and practical cases. The history of the U.S. Coast Guard during World War II is best illustrated through specific operational narratives, where their theoretical adaptability was tested under the most dangerous conditions. These practical examples highlight the breadth of their service, from intelligence gathering in the far north to large-scale rescue operations under fire, and ultimately to individual heroism in the Pacific. The critical theater of Greenland, the Weather War, and the Busco Incident. Greenland, the largest island in the world, became a silent but strategically crucial battleground known as the Weather War. Although WWII formally began with the German attack on Poland in September 1939, the strategic importance of Greenland crystallized after Germany invaded Denmark on April 9, 1940. As a Danish colony, Greenland was subsequently under potential Nazi influence, posing a significant threat to neighboring Allied nations like Canada, Britain, and the United States. Germany had a keen interest in Greenland for two primary reasons. First, they sought access to the island's cryolite mine, a mineral essential for processing aluminum. Second, and more critically for naval operations, Germany aimed to establish clandestine weather stations there. These stations were designed to provide weather information vital for the German U-boat campaign operating across the North Atlantic and Arctic Ocean. Accurate weather prediction from Greenland was also used to forecast conditions in the European theater of operations. Germany continued its attempts to install these strategic weather stations between 1942 and 1944. In response to this threat, the U.S. established a defensive treaty with Greenland even before the surprise Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. Between 1941 and 1945, the U.S. rapidly developed extensive infrastructure across Greenland. This included establishing weather stations, radio stations, navigational beacons, ports, depots, and search and rescue facilities, all essential for supporting air and sea traffic. Greenland played a crucial role in military planning, serving as a refueling point for military aircraft flying the critical route between the U.S. and England and aiding the routing of convoys. The meteorological intelligence gathered here formed the core strategy of the Allied counter-effort in the Weather War against Germany. The USCG provided one of the earliest signs of American readiness and commitment to this theater months before the nation formally entered the war. On September 12, 1941, the United States Coast Guard cutter USCG Northland, a fast and light coastal patrol boat, was investigating a suspicious vessel near Greenland's Franz Josef Fjord. The vessel was identified as the Norwegian trawler Busco. Investigation revealed that the Busco was actively servicing a radio station in Greenland and was controlled by German interests.
The very next day, a Coast Guard landing party went ashore. They successfully located and captured the clandestine radio station. They also managed to seize papers that the Nazi operatives were actively trying to burn. These documents proved to be of considerable intelligence value to the Coast Guard. The papers contained confidential instructions that detailed Hitler's specific plans for establishing radio stations in the far north. The captured crew of the Buscoe and those arrested at the radio station were subsequently taken to Boston, Massachusetts, for internment. This operation was historic. The Coast Guard was officially credited with achieving the first naval capture by the United States during the period of emergency, occurring before the U.S. officially entered the war on December 8, 1941. This incident underscored the Coast Guard's role not just as a defensive force, but as an active frontline intelligence and enforcement agency. The dangerous duty of weather ships, the loss of the Muskeget. The maintenance of the weather war required exceptional bravery, as illustrated by the fate of the USCG Muskeget. Weather ships were fundamental components of Allied operational planning, but their mission profile placed them in extreme peril. The United States ship, USS Muskeget, AG-48, was transferred to the USCG on June 30, 1942, specifically for use as a weather ship, receiving the designation USCG Muskeget, WAG-48. Operating out of Boston, Massachusetts as her home port, she was assigned to the North Atlantic Weather Patrol. The duty of these weather ships was critically important. They gathered continuous data on key atmospheric variables, including winds, temperatures, humidity, and pressure. This data allowed meteorologists to create the essential weather forecasts that supported all Allied military operations in the Atlantic, including U-boat hunting and convoy movements. However, this was categorized as dangerous duty. To collect continuous data, a weather ship had to remain at sea for approximately a month, cruising within a small, designated radius. Crucially, these missions were carried out with no naval protection, leaving the ships isolated and highly vulnerable while attempting to evade enemy submarines and simultaneously battling severe North Atlantic storms. The Muskeget departed Boston on August 24, 1942, for her second weather patrol. Her assignment was Weather Station No. 2, located off the southern tip of Greenland. After transmitting a routine weather report on September 9, 1942, the USCG Muskeget and her entire crew of 121 personnel were never heard from again. Details of her loss emerged later. German Navy submarine U-753, commanded by Kapitän-Leutnant Walter Goying, fired 2 torpedoes that struck the Muskeget at 2:54 p.m. on that same day, September 9, 1942. Goying subsequently claimed that he had misidentified the weather ship as a merchant cruiser. The U-755 surfaced following the initial sinking and observed a life raft with survivors. The submarine left the immediate area but returned several hours later. The submarine commander reported finding 8 men and 2 life rafts tied together. Goying later stated that he believed the survivors shouted that they were from an American ship. Tragically, no survivors were rescued. The loss of the USCG Muskeget marked a painful distinction. It was the only weather ship lost by the U.S. during the entirety of World War II. The vulnerability inherent in the Coast Guard's crucial solitary mission was thus highlighted by this severe tragedy. The Normandy invasion, the matchbook fleet. The high-stakes Allied invasion of Normandy, France on June 6, 1944, D-Day, provided another major platform for the Coast Guard to display its core value of life-saving. Among its various roles on D-Day, the Coast Guard's paramount duty was the rescue of troops struggling in the water along the invasion beaches. Operation Overlord planners were acutely aware that rescue craft would be desperately needed during the massive assault. They anticipated that invasion craft would sink and many troops would require water rescue after being wounded or simply falling into the choppy waters of the English Channel during the intense battle. In preparation for this massive logistical and humanitarian task, a fleet of rescue vessels was assembled. 60 83-foot USCG cutters, which had previously been patrolling along the east coast of the U.S. hunting for enemy submarines, were chosen for the mission. These cutters were transported across the Atlantic to England, carried on top of larger freighters, and once in England, they were modified specifically for use as dedicated rescue craft.
This assembled group of vessels became known as U.S. Coast Guard Rescue Flotilla 1. It was the only flotilla of its kind and quickly earned the nickname the Matchbook Fleet due to the small size of the 83-foot cutters relative to the vast channel. The deployment was carefully coordinated.
30 of these rescue craft were assigned to support the American invasion beach sectors of Utah and Omaha. The remaining 30 were positioned off the British and Canadian beaches, Gold, Juno, and Sword. The cutters followed immediately behind the first wave of Allied landing craft as they sped toward the beaches on June 6. Their presence proved vital. Throughout the intense fighting of the invasion day, this flotilla executed an astounding 1,438 rescues from the deadly waters of the English Channel. The bravery and proximity of the Coast Guardsmen to the action were captured in the photograph titled "Into the Jaws of Death," taken around 7:40 a.m. at the American Omaha Beach sector, Easy Red, by Coast Guard Chief Photographer's Mate Robert R. Sargent. The Coast Guard paid a heavy price for their life-saving mission that day. 15 Coast Guardsmen lost their lives. The pinnacle of sacrifice. Results and discussion. The varied operations of the Coast Guard, from intelligence gathering in Greenland to amphibious rescue at Normandy, all culminated in a deep-seated commitment to the primary mission Doug Munro had recognized when he enlisted: saving lives. No single event better illustrates the ultimate expression of this ethic than the selfless heroism displayed by Signalman First Class Douglas A. Munro at Guadalcanal. Douglas Albert Munro was born in Canada on October 11, 1919. His father was American and his mother was British. His family relocated to South Cle Elum in the state of Washington when he was a child. In the summer of 1939, recognizing the imminent threat of war, Doug was attending the Central Washington College of Education, but chose to enlist in the U.S. Coast Guard. He worked diligently to gain the necessary weight to meet the minimum enlistment requirement. Munro shared his deep-seated motivation with his sister, Patricia, explaining that he selected the Coast Guard specifically because its core mission was to save lives. While processing into the Coast Guard in Seattle, Washington, Munro encountered fellow recruit Raymond J. Evans, Jr. The two quickly formed a close bond and became very good friends, often assigned to the same ships throughout their service, leading their shipmates to nickname them the Gold Dust Twins. Munro, by then Signalman First Class, lost his life at the Battle of Guadalcanal on September 27, 1942. This pivotal battle in the Pacific Theater, fought from August 7, 1942 to February 9, 1943, marked the crucial transition for the Allies from defensive operations to an offensive campaign against the Empire of Japan. Munro's actions that day earned him the Medal of Honor. The Medal of Honor citation describes his small craft toward the shore. As he neared the beach, he signaled the rest of the craft to land. The decisive heroic act was what came next. Munro deliberately positioned his own craft, equipped with 2 small guns, as a shield. He placed it between the Japanese enemy forces and the beachhead. His intent was to draw the enemy's fire away from the other heavily loaded boats attempting to extract the Marines. This perilous task was nearly complete when Munro was struck and killed by enemy fire. Despite their leader falling, Munro's crew, 2 of whom had been wounded, carried on the mission until the very last boat had been loaded and successfully cleared the beach. The MOH citation concludes that Munro's outstanding leadership, expert planning, and dauntless devotion to duty ensured that he and his courageous comrades undoubtedly saved the lives of many who otherwise would have perished. He gallantly gave his life for his country. The human element of this sacrifice was witnessed by his close friend, Ray Evans. Evans was the one who heard Doug Munro's final words. According to Evans, Doug asked, Did they get off? Evans nodded in the affirmative, and then Doug was gone. Weeks shy of his 23rd birthday, Douglas Munro had achieved the purpose he had set for himself when he enlisted in 1939. He had saved lives. The enduring legacy of service. Munro's bravery established an immense and enduring legacy for the Coast Guard. Douglas Munro was initially buried in a temporary cemetery on Guadalcanal the day.
The Medal of Honor was formally presented to Doug's parents, James and Edith Munro, by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt at the White House on May 24, 1943. The impact of Doug's death on his family was profound. At the age of 48, his mother, Edith Munro, insisted on joining the U.S. Coast Guard Women's Reserve, known as the SPARS, an acronym derived from the motto Semper, Paratus, always ready. She did this to serve her country and to honor her son's legacy. At her request, she completed basic training alongside other Coast Guard recruits and was subsequently commissioned as a lieutenant junior grade. Doug's lifelong friend and comrade-in-arms, Raymond J. Evans, Jr., also received high honors. For his own extraordinary heroism fighting alongside Doug Munro at Guadalcanal, Evans was awarded the Navy Cross. Evans remained dedicated to the USCG after World War II, eventually receiving a commission. He retired in 1962 at the rank of commander and lived until 2013, passing away at the age of 92. The spirit of service continued through the family. Doug's sister, Patricia Edith Munro, also attempted to join the USCG following her brother's death, but like Doug initially, she could not meet the minimum weight requirement. Later in life, however, her son, Douglas Sheehan, named after his heroic uncle, joined the Coast Guard and eventually retired with the rank of commander. Douglas A. Munro's remains were repatriated to the United States in 1947. At his family's request, he was interred at his hometown of Cle Elum, Washington, instead of Arlington National Cemetery, so that they could visit his grave easily. His parents were eventually buried on either side of him at Laurel Hill Memorial Park. Following his Edith's death in 1983, she was buried next to her son with full military honors. Today, the Munro graves are designated as a State of Washington historical site, a permanent testament to the service's commitment and sacrifice. Comprehensive summary and final reflections. The history of the United States Coast Guard in World War II is fundamentally a story of profound organizational versatility and unwavering execution of essential duties, often performed under the most extreme conditions. From its formal establishment in 1915 through the incorporation of vital historical services like the Revenue Cutter Service, the Life-Saving Service, and the Lighthouse Service, the Coast Guard was inherently designed for diverse maritime roles. This inherent flexibility, encapsulated by the motto Semper Paratus, allowed for its rapid and effective integration into the total Allied war effort upon its transfer to the Department of the Navy. The USCG provided comprehensive operational support for every major amphibious landing, transporting troops and delivering thousands of tons of critical supplies across the Pacific, Atlantic, and Mediterranean theaters. They were integral to the maritime war, undertaking vital convoy escort duty and actively hunting enemy submarines. In the complex strategic arena, the Coast Guard managed the difficult, lonely, and dangerous mission of manning weather stations at sea. The intelligence gathered on winds and pressure supported vast operational planning, contributing to the Allied success in the crucial weather war against German U-boat campaigns. The tragic loss of the USCGC Muskeget, the sole weather ship lost during the war, serves as a stark reminder of the immense risk associated with this necessary duty. Furthermore, the service secured the home front using specialized coastal patrols and guarded newly captured beachheads against hidden snipers. The practical demonstration of the Coast Guard's life-saving ethic reached its zenith during the Normandy invasion, where the Matchbox fleet of small boats evacuated nearly 500 sole survivors from a sunken transport ship under heavy German fire. This audacious rescue operation demonstrated the Coast Guard's unique integration of military capability with its inherent humanitarian ethos. In Doug A. Munro's actions, as he single-handedly orchestrated the small boat evacuation of nearly 500 Marines trapped at Point Cruz, he intentionally positioned his own craft as a shield to draw the concentrated fire of the Japanese enemy, sacrificing himself so that others could live. His final question, "Did they get off?" captured the essence of the Coast Guard's primary mission and devotion to duty. The impact of this service transcended the war itself. The courage displayed fostered a powerful legacy, seen in the continuation of service by his comrade, Navy Cross recipient Commander Raymond J. Evans, Jr., and in the inspiring decision was essential to victory and stands as a testament to unparalleled dedication and sacrifice.